Hey everyone, CPO here, and in this video I'm going to be installing the AToM Race V2 intake from Blaze Performance. First, let me show you what comes in the box. You've got the accumulator there. You also have the cone air filter and the clamp that goes with that. You have two duct tabs, which we're going to put together as part of the assembly. You've got a random assortment of other little bits and bobs that we'll talk about as we get through the install. There were also a couple little extra clips, or I don't know what these things are called. They were in the box, so don't miss those. You've got your rubber beading, and then of course you've got your turbo inlet pipe, which will be specific for whichever turbo you have. So the first thing I need to do is go ahead and get rid of the current intake, which I have in the car now. It is an IEV2 intake, and it's been really nice. I've just always wanted an enclosed intake, hopefully to help control some IATs. And I've had this little 3-inch adapter that I made, this aluminum adapter, which I think might actually create a little bit of a airflow bottleneck, if you will. But other than that, the IEV2 intake has been good. It's a standard cold air intake, but cold air intakes kind of suck in a lot of hot air because they're not enclosed. So anyway, that's why I went with the AToM Race V2. So getting this thing out of the car, I've had it in for maybe a couple of years now. It's one of the very first things I did when I started upgrading the performance of the car. And yeah, this is my little bridge that I made to adapt the hoses. All right, so I'm going to remove the PCV hose off of my catch can from the turbo inlet pipe. And then, of course, that allows me to remove the turbo inlet pipe from the turbo itself. And yeah, that's the last of the intake removal. So back to the table, what we're going to do is put together these two duct tabs, and they're put together with a combination of tabs and screws. So by the way, this thing is upside down, I can already tell, so I'm just gonna flip that. That's one of those little plastic clips that you use to screw into. And what I'm gonna do is just use a screwdriver to push these tabs out a little bit so that they can fit into the slots on the other half. And they're gonna slip into those slots just like that. And then you'll screw the assembly together using the two screws. They are the 4x6mm screws, and just screw them down until you've got some decent tension. Because of those plastic clips, you can strip them out if you just keep screwing. So get it snug and should be good to go, just like that. Next, I'm going to go ahead and install this rubber beading along the top edge of the duct. You can see I already have my coolant line running below the intake from the previous install. But the duct is going to slip in and actually screw into place the same way the factory duct screwed in. Those little plastic clips are going to capture your factory screws if you still have them. As it turns out, I have no idea where my factory screws were, so I found a couple screws that worked just fine. I'm pretty sure these were inner fender liner screws from my front wheel wells. I removed the top screw to keep from rubbing. They worked in there just fine. Unfortunately, as you see, things are going to change because it's my car. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and put the PCV nipple into the turbo inlet pipe. And then also we have the little nipple for the vacuum line that's coming off of the intake. And now this is ready to go into the car. I'm not going to lie, this was a royal pain in the butt. It was the last time I tried to do this, and it did not fail to frustrate me again on this install. Basically, that turbo inlet pipe to the turbo is a really snug fit. In particular, this is a 660 size turbo, so it's got the 3-inch turbo inlet pipe diameter. And there's just no room in there between the vacuum lines and the master cylinder for the brake, and just trying to get that thing, you can't get at it straight. You have to kind of go at an angle, and then it gets all kinked in there. Anyway, I struggled with it for quite a while before I finally got it. But as you can see, eventually hard work does pay off, and I was able to get that thing pushed over the turbo inlet. Yeah, that was super annoying. And this whole job is super easy, but that thing took way extra time that I was not anticipating. I did start out with the clamp already pre-installed on the turbo inlet pipe, which you would normally do so that it's there so you can tighten it down once you have it on the turbo. I ended up removing it just because, like, trying to manipulate it, it was cutting up my thumb. So I removed it and then got it all in, and then opened it all the way up, basically unscrewed it till it spread open, slipped it over, and then reinstalled it. So you could go either way, but if you plan to pre-install it so that you have the clamp there to tighten down, then this is the time to do that. Obviously, if you're doing this with a factory style turbo with the inlet flange, this becomes a lot easier of a job. It's just the aftermarket turbos sometimes create some havoc. So pro tip is to go ahead and get that vacuum line installed into this inlet pipe before you put the rest of the intake on, because on this particular intake, it is pushed way back onto the turbo inlet pipe instead of normally closer up to the actual filter. Now we want to install the cone filter into the air accumulator, and there are three 4x16 millimeter screws we're going to use for that. You basically just line up the holes on the air accumulator with the little circles where you're going to screw into on the cone air filter, push it in, and then just screw those down. Again, like, this would be easy to strip out, so what you want to do is just snug the screws down until they feel tight, but don't overdo it or you'll just strip them out. All right, so now we can move this air accumulator and filter assembly over to the car to finish the install. It's just going to slip inside the turbo inlet pipe and then around the flange on the duct. Make sure you have your clamps in place before you insert that into the mix. You can put it with the Blaze Performance logo at the top, or as you'll see, I ended up changing it up later and had the AToM Race logo up. Doesn't really matter, but you've got some options there if you choose to do that. Then I tightened down the clamps. I started with the turbo inlet to the accumulator clamp, and then I tightened down the clamp at the duct. And then the last clamp that I tightened down was the one at the turbo. Once I got that finished, the only thing I had left to do was plug in my PCV hose from the catch can and get that clipped into place. And that is it, guys. That is the AToM Race V2 in a 2019 Golf R. And if you are a normal person and you've led a good life, this is probably job done for you. However, I'm not so lucky. I couldn't close my hood. And yeah, it was super frustrating. I was actually worried I was going to have to pull it out and put my old intake back in. I placed some tape to see where it was hitting. It was hitting at the top of the air accumulator. Turns out it was also hitting at the top of the duct on the more passenger side. And the reason is I've got this air vent on the hood that is lowered and happens to sit right in the bad place for this particular intake. So I had to do some modifications to get it to work, and thankfully I was able to get it to work. I basically disassembled the duct and made it like a 3/4 wide so that I could get it to work. And then also I had to push the entire duct and air accumulator assembly sort of back and down. You can see I don't even have it screwed anymore. It's a couple of inches back, or maybe an inch back and an inch down. But I was able to get the hood closed. It's basically press fit in there. So it's not necessarily ideal, but it does allow me to run with this particular intake. And so if you have any better ideas of how I could solve this problem, please let me know. I think this is going to be solid. Anyway, I've gone out and done some test drives. Haven't done a wide open throttle run yet. And it sounds basically the same. It might actually, the turbo flutter, when I let off the throttle, might actually be a little louder with this intake. Maybe because it's the straight shot from the turbo straight out to the front of the car. I can still hear the turbo whistle, which I love that sound. It sounds just as loud as it did before. So yeah, that's it. Hopefully you found this helpful. And if you have an aftermarket hood, buyer beware. It may or may not work as intended if you've got some extra hoodie things hanging down in places that aren't normal. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.